Red. I'm part of the DC Sustainable Fashion Collective. I'm not going to talk. So I just want to welcome our first panelists, so Lindsey, Carolyn, Bibiana, and Kimberly, and I'll let them do all the introduction.
Hi everybody, my name is Lindsey. I came here from New York today. I had lived in DC for a little over a month. Oh, no, longer than a month, a year. Big difference. But a little background on me is I currently work for Remake, which is a nonprofit focused on making fashion a force for good. We are globally recognized. We have ambassadors, not just here in the US, but across the world. And prior to that, I had spent 5+ years in the fast fashion or retail world. So I supported specifically a retail brand based in Columbus, Ohio, and then here locally an agency with a few different brands. But basically what happened to me and what led me to where I am today is I kind of saw the smoke and mirrors where in the marketing world I was constantly pushing forward the message, but I never really truly understood what was happening behind closed doors. And just a few conversations with my production partners that were geared to me understanding why product wasn't reaching stores in time led to the exposure and awareness that has caused me to make this my life's work and mission. I'm really excited for the panelists we have here today. As someone who's new to the movement, changing my consumption pattern and then doing my part to change my physical employment so that I can have a larger impact and not be a part of the problem. I think everyone up here has done a great job of spearheading and leading the industry. Jill? Hilary, sorry. Sorry. Fashionably on time. All right, so I will let them all do their introductions. Again, we're really excited to address the fashion economy, the existing model, and where we are. I think Elizabeth did a great job of laying down the groundwork, but we're going to go a little bit more into the details.
Perfect, thank you so much. And excuse me if my voice is a little scratchy. Conveniently, as soon as I sat down, I had an itch in my throat, so excuse me there. So my name is Carolyn Becker. I'm Goodwill, Greater Washington's Digital Communications Manager. I run all of our social media platforms from Facebook, Instagram to LinkedIn, as well as the platforms for our tuition-free public charters tool that awards high school diplomas. It's actually right on G Street called the Goodwill Access Center. Lastly, as a part of Goodwill, I spearhead and push and pull the levers behind our lifestyle brand and community-driven organization called Finding Your Good. Within Finding Your Good, we have a website, we have all of our accounts and an event series that's geared towards building a community in DC that's focused on fashion, art, DIY, and overall sustainability. Outside of Goodwill, I am also a fashion blogger who shops, of course, secondhand. And in my role, as a fashion blogger, I promote a lot of reusing and recycling fashion. Prior to my role with Goodwill, I actually was in the marketing world on the agency side and worked with a lot of clients from CPG, nonprofit, and found myself in a place where I didn't find that I was affecting the community around me. And so I wanted to work, more in an organization that was DC focused, spreading change and doing good, and that's where I found myself now at Goodwill. And within my relationship with Goodwill, I was actually a fashion blogger prior to being at Goodwill, and I partnered with Goodwill on writing about thrift fashion and vintage, and with that partnership, I was able to make that my full-time job. Thrifting, a reality and a dream job, so yeah, I thrift for a living. Not actually, but I do that sometimes.
Thanks, my name is Obler. I'm the co-curator of the show Fast Fashion Slow Art, which hopefully some of you had the chance to see already, or if not, will have the chance to see today. I want to introduce my co-curator, fellow services five. Well, you already know because she raised her hand. But anyway, I just want to say I'm not the only. If you want to talk to us about the show, you can also talk to us. I think our schedule at 11. You can walk over and we can hang out a little bit if you have any questions. And I also wanted to make sure that you know that one of the artists in our show is here, Kat Mazza. Where are you? One of our artists in our show who made the electronic gun Maxian is here, and she is actually like way more knowledgeable about these issues than I am. So she's a great person to talk to. And two of her, so she worked with a collective, Lattice 20 Collective, and two of the members of that collective are here too. You just go there. So yes, so there are more people to talk to in relation to the show. And I think I'll probably talk about the show more, but that's really what I wanted to say introduction-wise.
Good morning, my name is Kimberly Guthrie, and I'm here from the VCU down in Richmond. And I'm here, and I'm happy to also be here with the person who inspired me to be at this place. A former colleague, Linda, is here with me, and in 2006, I tagged along with her, stayed and crashed in her hotel room to the first green fashion event in New York, and I think you remember this, right? And that's when I caught the bug. So it's been 13 years of my life, eating, drinking, sleeping, digesting sustainable fashion in all its realms. I've been teaching at VCU for over 25 years, and been really lucky for the students in the audience to be able to teach as many design studios that have a focus on sustainable design strategies, materiality, ethical sourcing, just the gamut. And so been able to research, present around the world. And I feel like I should be the point of activist now, so maybe it's this time in my life that's what I should be doing. I was sharing that with the students behind me. And I got to meet Joelle at another conference 2 years ago, and you never know who you're going to sit next to and how it's going to impact your life. So I feel that there are no coincidences. Things happen for a reason, and we're all here for a reason. And I'm glad we're all here together for that one reason.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Hilary Jochmans. Thank you for having me here today. Really inspired to be around folks who are both as students and as professionals that care about this industry. I'm a government affairs and political consultant based here in Washington. I spent about 12 years on Capitol Hill, and then I ran the New York Governor's office, their office here in Washington, before I started my own business. So I sort of split my time between two different areas, but the one that sort of focuses on here today is I have written about and speak about quite a bit the intersection of fashion and politics, where government gets involved in this industry. And you think about it, it's such a broad industry. We've heard a lot of stats already today, and it impacts so many different areas. It's not just the design process. Excuse me. It's also labor conditions. It is environmental issues. It is immigration. It is tax. It is trade. So many different areas. And so that's why I try to pull everyone together to think about these issues and to talk about that. I also serve as a consultant to the Save the Garden Center, which is a group in New York that advocates for continued domestic production, particularly in the Garden Center of New York, but also in general US-based production, also on the board of the Model Alliance and the New Fashion Initiative with Phyllis. So, thank you very much.
Yeah, so I'm pretty loud. I can go without the mic. You guys can hold it since you're going to take it over from here. But we wanted to start off by addressing what is the problem and how we got to where we are. And we thought a great way to do that was for Hilary and Kimberly to lead it. So, you want to hear about the mic? Yes?
Okay, so we'll put it in here. So yeah, we had a little powwow this week. I'm so happy to meet you all that way beforehand. And they kind of wanted me to kind of take a temperature or present the temperature of at least where I thought we are right now. And as Elizabeth had mentioned, the industry is being highly organized. And I do think it's a great time with all that's been happening this week with all the climate marches and our big inspiration in Greta. I wish we had a Greta for fashion, right? That'd be so awesome.
I would say it's the closest.
That's right. So we've heard some buzzwords, and we've heard mentioned already today. Of course, it's consumption, traceability, transparency, circularity, and another one is inclusive versus exclusive when it comes to the industry. I think it's better timing this time around. I mentioned going back to 2006. Because when it first came out, it was called green fashion, right? And that was right in line with that horrible economic global crisis that we all survived, and the Gen Zs that are here, they lived through that. You know, some they watch their parents or relatives or friends, whoever across this country, have to rebuild after the crisis. So what were the catalysts? Why are we 2012 from her first book, and it's taken almost a decade for it to become part of the common conversation? So I think there are a couple of catalysts that we have to kind of look at, and one of them was the wake-up call that Rana Plaza gave to so many people. From that, then we got the documentaries of True Cost, Who Made My Clothes, River Blue, and of course we had a humongous overarching organization that is Greenpeace, who did Detox My Fashion campaign, and now they're doing the Detox Their Runway campaign. And then of course books with authors like Elizabeth. So now it's really coming in to, I think, the mindsets of more people who, like she says, I'm not into fashion, well, how many clothes do you have in your closet, right? So there is a lot of negative, but I am hoping that we can also start to shift our focus on what is changing, what is positive. I am putting a lot of my fashion stock in Gen Z. I really think that they are going to help write this road for us. And I think the goal is to make sure that we all, our educators are in here, graduate those students and really make them the change makers that they need to be.
I'm not sure what else to add to that. You covered a lot of it here, and I think we're going to talk later on a little bit more about sort of what the role of regulation is in this process. But folks have said this before, but this is a huge industry. It's $2.5 trillion. This is not a frivolous, fluffy industry. This is hugely impactful to the U.S. economy, to the world economy. And the U.S. alone employs 1.8 million people. And like I said before, this covers a variety of areas. It's designers, it's manufacturers, it's all the people in the supply chain, right? I mean, how do you get the materials on the ship, on the plane, on the train, however it's traveling? Computer operations, data security, in addition to the actual manufacturing and labor, either domestically or internationally. So I think it's really important to keep in context of a global industry that impacts so many different aspects. It's not just one narrow looking fashion, they think, you know, the high-end designer. It's so much more to it than that.
So from there, we thought we now have narrated the problem and told you where we're at. What is the industry currently doing to perpetuate the problem? So to give you a few stats to set the stage, it takes 2,720 liters of water to make one t-shirt. That's 3 years of drinking water for one person, for one t-shirt. Clothing production, we heard a little bit about this before, emits more greenhouse gas emissions than international shipping and the aviation industries combined. In 15 years, we'll face choosing between cotton production to make more clothes or having enough clean drinking water. So what's currently happening, Bibi?
So actually, I feel like Elizabeth Klein can tell us what's currently happening. I teach at GW, and the wonderful thing about having done this exhibition here at GW is that I've done a lot of teaching in relation to the show, and my students really overdressed. I started reading The Conscious Closet, but it wasn't out when I made my school buy, so we're reading overdressed, which I love. And I don't remember statistics, like they just go in and out, like they're very impressive, and then I forget them, so I'm giving you the statistics. But one of the things also that we talk about in my classes is the sort of the significance of medium. So there's a kind of activism that involves writing books or going out and giving lectures. And I've never thought of myself as an activist, but I feel like there's some role that our exhibition might be playing, and I encourage you to go. And the reason why I'm the one answering this question is that they're mostly videos in the exhibition. And there's a different way of learning about the experience of what's going on now. Or in the last 10 or 20 or the earliest video in the show is 1982. What is the experience of working in a factory like? And I think we sometimes make assumptions about, you know, we've seen sort of clips of sweatshops, and we see people hunched over sewing machines, and so that's one experience. What does that even mean? And so the videos that we have in the show, I think, help us a little bit get further into understanding the range of experiences. I'll draw your attention to a couple of the videos in the show. Long Bing's 15 hours. This is a 15-hour video. You probably won't see the whole thing today because you don't have time. As this title may suggest, given this context, it is a real-time video of a day in the life of a garment processing facility in China. And that's the length of this workday because they're on a rush order for children's jeans and they need to get them done. We hadn't seen the video before it came to the show because it's such an enormous file that we didn't see a viewing copy. And so I think I sort of made assumptions about what the video would be like. And it wasn't like that. So I do encourage you to spend some time being invited into this community, what it's like to work in this particular factory. And then contrast that, for example, with Sweatshop Deadly Labor, which is a reality television show produced by Norway's main newspaper, Aftenposten. Also, sort of, we're being invited to be part of a community this time in Cambodia. What is it like to work in a sweatshop? Highly dramatized because it's a reality television show, and so you get a sort of different way of relating to working conditions. But I could go on and on, but I'll just invite you to watch the videos and spend some time learning about it that way. Which one is
Add a little bit. So, talk about the video about the children's wear denim. So Lindsey mentioned how much water it takes to make it still does sometimes make a t-shirt. And a lot of you all have on jeans or normally. How many people wear jeans every day? It's like a ridiculous number, right? So back when I first started doing this, the number that they used all the time for data that we like to remember is 2,900 gallons of water to make a traditional pair of jeans. And we have pivoted, so there are companies, and I'm sure you all know some of them, who have been able to at least cut that water use by half. And we have to celebrate those accomplishments. You know, it's the Levi's waterless technology. They have open sourced their innovation. Anybody who wants to produce denim can tap into into all their work and make denim in a low impact way. There are companies now, and I think this is where the science and the innovation come together, where in regenerative fibers, so pre-consumer cotton waste, that can be turned into a fiber and reused again and blended with other fibers. We have companies like Lindsey who are cutting through all that stuff and closed loop, catching all their effluent. I'm sharing this with some students and educators so they can kind of add this to their arsenal of information. Another one is right here, like in Raleigh, North Carolina, and it was the Kodak company. Remember how Kodak kind of, so it's now called, spelled NAIA, Eastman, and they take, they capture pre-consumer cotton waste, and they're blending it mostly with lyocells and things like that. So there are options out there for makers, designers, young brands. They just have to know where they're going, where to find it. I think that's another black hole is for startups or young people, they just don't know where to go and what to use and what not to use. So I think there's some mentoring that needs to happen. And yeah, so I just want to add to that. There are good things happening, yes.
And one of the things that we keep going back to is consumer education and designer education as well. Just for a show of who's in the room, how many of you are students? About half. And then the rest of you, are you in the fashion industry? Or allies that are interested in learning more? Cool. Great show. So we wanted to also, in this panel, give you an exposure to our learnings, a little deeper down from production to design, but also what you can know as consumers. So as a member of the Remake community, what we focus on is providing videos and educational aspects that help you improve your consumption. So whether that be finding ethical brands, we have a sourcing, and we also try to educate the consumer on how to wear and mend their resources. And we have a great panelist here, Carolyn, who can speak to the garment's lifestyle and life cycle a little bit more in detail. And I think that's something all of us can learn more from.
Sure, of course. So, based on my understanding and experiences at Goodwill, on my end of things, I'm seeing in our production area all items that are donated to us, from sometimes bedspreads to all types of clothing. But it's important to think about when you're giving a donation to Goodwill, side note about education, to learn about all of our donations and what we can and cannot accept. They're all on our website, or I'm the person that will respond to your message on Facebook or wherever else. But with the garment's life cycle, what we receive, to my understanding, it's not just with the garment about all of its production that we're all discussing here today and where the materials that are used are acquired or sourced from, but it's how we use a garment and like how we get it at Goodwill. So a life cycle that I often forget about is how a garment is used after you buy it. So life cycle during the usage process. So you buy it, you wear it once, you wash it, hopefully you'll wear it more than once, up to 200, 400, I forget the stat, 200 times. That would be a goal for me personally. But thinking about a garment's use before it's donated and how you can ensure that a donated item can be reused and given to a home for it to be worn in another awesome outfit or any type of outfit. So thinking about when you donate it and when you use it, so you acquire it, you wear it a few times, and then think about how it's washed. Into what Elizabeth was saying, the laundry detergent that you use when you are laundering an item. Are you hand washing it? Are you using a green-friendly product? Are you buying an item that has a lot of dye in it where you have to already wash it off the get-go? It's important to think about these things when you're buying an item, from the start. And then after you're laundering it several times, how is the garment functioning in the environment? Is it something that wrinkles easily? Do you have to steam it often? These are things that I often always don't think about when I'm buying products, and I'm starting to think about more. So then when the item gets to Goodwill, oftentimes we get items that are pretty worn, things that are brand new with tags. But before one donates, always think about how you are using an item and how it is being processed and being utilized in your life, because that affects its longevity and its reuse. Because we do get donations that can be reused, and we get some items that have holes and have, that don't have buttons, things are cut up, and that is a part of the life cycle too. And we decided at Goodwill we'll continue to recycle those items too. But how does that object get to Goodwill? How does it get to a donation center? It's important to think about, because everything that we do and how we treat a garment, it means something and it affects our environment or the people around us, or it's just a reuse process. We're talking about reuse, but we have to think about how we can make something be able to be reused. So, that's my 2 cents.
So prior to you ever receiving a garment, the garment has a life cycle that starts with design and concept, and then for those that are not students or in the design industry, this is where a lot of the materials are being thought through, how it's going to get to the store, when it's going to reach that thematic of that brand story. And I think we have some great insight on the design and the production that I had no exposure to until being on the corporate retail side that some of our panelists can share.
So, as we spoke about these new platforms, I think we can I guess we could start there and see where this goes. But the resale, the rent, and that major investment that ThredUp just got with their collaboration with Macy's, and of course how the Real is so real. I mean, how many people have not been all or bought something from the Real, right? So, and how it's only here, and how she's really trying to take that platform over into Europe. And I'm wondering how it's been affected there, because they have a different sense of consciousness than we do when it comes to our clothes. So I don't know if it'll be as successful in another country. Some of the missteps I think that we want to think about are overproduction by companies just to meet the minimum to get the price they have to get it on the sale floor. The number of returns for online purchases, all that freight, all those Amazon trucks, you hear about these Amazon drivers getting into car accidents. And then how does direct-to-consumer changes the entire equation, made to order. I want this color, my Adidas are going to be green with a blue stripe and my name on the side, So how does that impact production or overproduction? I think a lot of emphasis has to go again into Elizabeth mentioned this as well, is improving those supply chains and how transparent are they, how can you shorten them, and how can you bring a lot of it back to onshore, wherever your shore might be. Again, we talked about material selection, and I was just talking to Lindsey about this beforehand. How many of you saw that Instagram post about that neon green bikini that was like, the fabric was carcinogenic? Anybody know what I'm talking about? Anyway, so I was in class just Thursday with my student. She's on Move, and she's looking for this piece of fabric. She goes, Miss Guthrie, what is this? And it has this big yellow thing, proven to cause cancer and birth defects, and Mood is selling it to people. I mean, legislation, how is this even able to come into the country, these fabrics? Like these beauty companies, like Beauty Counter has like this dirty dozen, whatever, that shouldn't be in our products. Europeans have so many fewer products, chemicals in their products, and we are allowing all these products in our beauty and health and beauty products. It goes hand in hand, but we're letting it into our fabrics. I think that's a great conversation to keep on going with. And I'm going to end here and pass it down to be on the more positive side, is to pay attention to what H&M and Inditex or Zara are doing. If you haven't been on Zara's website lately, it's like unrecognizable what it used to look like. These brands now have these huge sustainability chunks in their website. They're trying to be super accountable, and it almost sounds like a dichotomy or a oxymoron that these fashion brands are trying to make right. But you have to give them some credit. Again, all eyes are on these brands, and hopefully the emphasis or the pressure from us as consumers and from students and from legislation will kind of help keep this on the right path.
I'll just actually, I'm going to deviate a bit to talk about the cosmetics. I think that's a really good example of the lack of regulation we have in this country on so many products. The Cosmetics Act has not been updated since 1934. We didn't even have most of these products in 1934. And so there's been legislation introduced each year. Senator Feinstein has a bill. I forget who has it in the House, but it's not getting the traction. Right? I mean, look at how many competing issues there are on the Hill right now. It's always fun to come talk about government regulation in the era of impeachment. But these are still really important issues, right? And if we don't talk about them, then we're abrogating our responsibility as citizens. We can't let the broader impeachment issues take over the national dialogue. I'm going to have my soapbox here for a little bit. But it's really important to talk about the issues in our parties, whether it be in sustainability or in immigration or wherever your personal issue is. We have to continue that conversation or we really have lost. Now, we have to temper our expectations. We're probably not going to have a lot of great, insightful legislation passing in the next 6 months. That doesn't mean we stop talking about it. Doesn't mean we stop advocating for it.
So I think Kimberly did a great job of discussing some of the existing issues, but for those of you that are not on the business side, which I hadn't been, I think I was most surprised while being at a large corporate retailer is the model that they created to sustain pushing more units, which is detrimental to our environment and the workers that are creating it, is actually also killing them. They can't sustain it, they have to promo harder, the price of the product is even less, and a lot of them are struggling, and you see this in their financial reporting. But this comes to the end of the day as we're prioritizing profit over the environment and the makers and their lifestyle. And as consumers, we actively get to choose our buying. We get to vote with our dollars every day, not just every 4 years. And we actively are shifting the industry, and that's why it's so important for everyone in this room, not just the designers who are creating the change, but you, when you leave this room, is just being more aware and actively deciding, I'm going to reuse this, or if I don't reuse this, I'm going to find a friend who can use it. Swap parties are really awesome. But going back to the life cycle of the product and the garments, and how many garments, when we do try to bring them to a secondhand shop, don't find a home. I think Carolyn has great insight from her time at Goodwill.
Definitely do. And I have a few tips thinking about what you buy and the different types of materials. It's important to remember what materials last longer and which ones are not hazardous. I was reading this a few days ago, but the items that are most friendly to the environment and last the longest and have the least hazardous materials are, of course, natural one's cotton, anything that's like hemp or linen, all good to use. Materials like polyester or rayon or nylon are the most harmful to the environment because of the dyes that are used in these products, or also just the way that they're processed and the way that they disintegrate after use. So that's just something to think about. And then also with regards to transportation of items, when we're buying things, it's often that products need to be rushed to the store, rushed to Goodwill, rushed to any type of retailer. And I was reading this in the book, and I remembered that products do spoil as well, or things can expire. So if something doesn't get to a store or warehouse in time, things can easily be discarded or you can't use anymore. So that's often something to think about when we're shopping fast fashion. But I forget, can you rewind to the question? I went on a tangent for a second. I was like, these are things I wanted to say. It was about the donation cycle.
The average product life cycle, what does
Yes.
it look like? And then also, a lot of these garments are made out of materials, as Kimberly mentioned, that are not the best for you. Your skin is your largest organ, and so it's actively touching that. But then when you put it into the washing machine, that is now entering our water stream. So what does that look like?
Sure. So from a donation cycle standpoint, the items that are donated to us the most, the biggest quantities are, we see a lot of casual wear, so t-shirts, jeans, things that you wear often and get worn more quickly. So we get those donations. We get a lot of undergarments as well, because they are made to be more so use once and use once, wash, use again, wash, and so the product life cycle of that is much shorter than say a blazer or a jacket, where you do wear those maybe every day during the winter, but they're built to stand and would last a much longer time. We see that activewear is often something that's not donated as much because you want to buy activewear that not only fits one well and is comfortable, but will last hiking or running for long periods of time. So we don't see those as frequently. Like we were saying, a lot of t-shirts and pajamas, things that are already not made to last, that are worn pretty frequently. And so I think we accept all types of donations, all types of garments, but with our donation cycle process, we prefer to, that one donate things that can be reused, things that can be recycled, and that we can, offer in our store to create funds that will fund our workforce development programs and training programs in the greater Washington area. We will accept things that are damaged, things that have holes, missing buttons, things that are missing an arm or a leg, something that was cut in a DIY project, we'll accept it all, because it's important that recycling doesn't just happen with reusing something, it happens with our salvage operations, where we will put things in, I forget the word for it right now, I'm blanking, but we'll sell things in bulk to textile recyclers who will use those textiles in insulation or usage as rags. So with the donation cycle, you think that everything that's donated to Goodwill is resold, but in fact, a very small fraction of the things that we get donated are actually made it to our sales floor. The donations that can't be worn or reused are then again recycled in another way that you don't see at our retail locations. I will say this, and this goes along with the way that we use things and thinking about how something comes to us. I know that wet garments and mold and mildew happens in all of our homes, but it is something that we also recycle at our stores and in our salvage operations. But I would say that if you don't want that mildew item or something that's wet, launder it or something before it gets to Goodwill, because that is something that's hazardous and another way to create bacteria in this stream of recycling. When one of those items with mildew or something goes into a bale that's resold and used in a textile recycler, that item can contaminate a whole bale of items that can be reused. And I was reading and I learned that when a mildew item is moldy and is in a bale along with other things, bacteria spreads and the bales can spontaneously combust. So that means that nothing of that can be reused. So the donation cycle process is complex, but it's important to find donation centers that will accept as many donations as possible so that they can, at least at the very least, if you don't know what to do with it, a donation center can help you sort it and help it get to a place instead of putting it in a landfill. which I'll segue to. And I'm just going to say a little stat plug because I'm here to represent Goodwill. This past year, over 40 million pounds of items were saved from area landfills. So all that was recycled in some way, shape, or form. Through our stores and our recycling operations, through salvage. So just know that when you donate to a place like Goodwill and other nonprofits, that it's not, things aren't thrown away. You won't go up to our dumpster and see clothing or items in there.
So just to touch back on with Goodwill, we have a great relationship with Goodwill Industries in Richmond as well. So how long is it? 5-7 years, we started collecting all the muslin scraps from the studio and collecting them, and they would come and they would, the sustainability office would come and they would weigh them for us. We got this little Silver Star Award, but Goodwill just mostly shreds those things. So if your school doesn't have a garment or textile recycling program, I take it up and ask your students to start one. It's not that hard. You have a place here to take it, and you guys do the shredding, correct? And then she's talking a lot about fabric and materials, and we wouldn't have clothes if it wasn't for fabric and materials. So there are things that, again, to think about. They are able to recycle nylon now. I mean, if Stella McCartney can do it, why can't all the other luxury brands do it as well? She's like she's like an icon to me of all that she's been doing. And I just in here a report that I want to share with everybody because they can download it. It's called The Pulse of the Fashion Industry. I don't know if you all know about this report, all of you. And the 2019 one is out, and I think this is just a good way to end it with 4 questions. And they've got some stats here from consumers about what triggered them to pay attention to sustainability. 50% of respondents said it was climate change awareness that made them think about sustainability in fashion, which I thought was a great way to tie all this in together. Almost half, another 49%, said that natural disasters in the world are making them think more about the effects of the fashion industry on the world. They're reading about it. Kudos to Elizabeth. They're watching documentaries, like we mentioned before. Flooding is another trigger. The tsunami in Asia actually rated a little higher than the factory fire in Bangladesh. So this is where the consumer's headed. So as businesses and designers, we have to understand where our consumers are, where are they lacking in their education, and how can we help them, because they're not going to wait for brands and governments. I mean, they're going to have to take it upon themselves, and the industry ourselves can help support the consumer.
I'm not paying attention, Sean, but I'm just excited by all this conversation, but also totally overwhelmed. Like, there are all these things that I can do, and then there's this. But then I also have questions because, I mean, it seems like a good idea to recycle nylon, but then, like, what are there ill effects of nylon? So I mean, so we have to look at making new nylon. Right. I mean, so that seems good. That seems like a good thing, but like it doesn't seem like as good as some other possible things. Although we have all this nylon, my overwhelm it. I'm going to use this as a moment to make a plug for you to read our exhibition catalog, which I think if you haven't received a copy, hopefully there should be copies for everybody, which is exciting. Thank you, Bowden, for making that all possible. Anyway, lots of thank yous. But hopefully you'll read the catalog. So in the show, there's really focus on labor and what is the experience and other things too. And Kat Mass's piece, which you see sort of the effects of the results of machine-edited labor. In the catalog, we have 2 essays, one by Kirsty Robertson and one by Tu. One of them focuses on distribution, and so it's back to something we were talking about a while ago about the speed of, like, if you can't get it out, like, then it's waste. And so she sort of spent some time thinking about that problem. And then the other essay thinking about, okay, so it would be nice to have, for example, a suit that you could just wear forever. It could just be one suit. But first of all, probably no one would wear the one suit forever. And then what is that material and what will happen to it in the fullness of time? And so that's where this is where I started with the catalog. So okay, you just recycle. It's great for programs to be like, okay, we're going to recycle this waste, and then it's still going to throw out, get thrown out. So it doesn't make it okay to produce more of that. You know, like, so there's that danger of like, oh, well, if we can recycle it, then we can keep producing it because we can recycle it. But at some point, sort of that's going to end up in the landfill and do all sorts of other damage. Like, I don't even know what. So that's my 2 cents. If you want to. That's it.
I just want to, I'm not sure I'm doing on time here, but talking about education, educating consumers, but also educating government officials, members of Congress. Advocacy is not just, the lobbyists that everybody thinks about. Advocacy is what you can do as an individual, right? So at a minimum, we all wear clothes. So we're all impacted by this. Seriously. And many of you in the room are probably also designers or work in manufacturing. So this is also your business, right? So you should go talk to your local representative, whether it be at the state, local, federal level. There's regulations on all different aspects of government on these issues. And educate them about what does this mean. You think about it, we're all really interested in this topic, right? And we're all learning something here today. So you can imagine people who have not been exposed to this before, they have a huge learning curve on this. And so to go have that basic education, and then, you're the ones who are going to know best, if you're working in the industry, what needs to be changed, right? So go talk to them about that. Whether it be like the green guides maybe updating, if you want to talk about the Green New Deal, if you want to talk about carbon emissions, immigration, the tariffs that are out there right now, and that impacts where things are going to be produced, which impacts how much garments have to be transported, which impacts the environment. Everything is connected here. So I would really encourage people to do your advocacy. It could just be on a personal, local level as well.
Just following up with what Hilary just said, I always like to think back to a year ago when Mark Zuckerberg was going back and forth with members of Congress about Facebook and privacy, and they were asking how Facebook made money. So there's the assumption that the government has more awareness and more knowledge on how the behind the scenes is working for the different industries, but that's not the case. And right now in that lapse, we as consumers do have to take on a little bit more responsibility, but the US, while being behind from other countries, Elizabeth pointed out, Europe is really definitely ahead of the curve. Fashion revolution is way more of a movement and taken off there. And it's just people like you continuing to be more conscious. Nobody's perfect, and you just have to look to the conscious consumer and try to change your behavior and change your model of consuming to make that change. With that being said, do we have time for like 2 questions? Cool. Okay. Anyone? Oh, no. More than 2. All right. So we have time for 2 to 3. But what I do want to say is after this, I will also be sending resources that all the panelists shared with me, a bunch of informative links from their findings that helped inform where they are today. So we'll be sending that, and you'll all have them as resources after this as well. All right, in the back.
So in 2000.
Lindsey, it's okay, I'm spending flour.
In 2015, Consumer Report did a study on Made in America textiles, and what it said was that I believe it said 2/3 of Americans are more likely to shop in stores that sell brands they know are made here, and I think it was like 85% of consumers believe that that textiles that are made here are more, are more like quality made in terms of the people that are making them. And so I was just wondering, in terms of this conversation that we're having about sustainable textiles, one thing that I have noticed in previous conversations is that they've really driven home not only fair trade, not only reuse, recycle, in terms of some of the labor issues as well, but also Made in America textiles. And I think we're at a point, you said we have, it's a $2.5 trillion industry. Well, we're at a point where, we are importing more than we're exporting. We have a huge trade deficit in terms of, our trade with these international countries and factories. And I'm just wondering, is there anything, and this maybe could be directed toward, I forgot your name, but Hilary, okay, and I know you have worked on the Hill and things, so I guess I'm wondering, are there any strategies you've seen as effective for advocating for more exports of American products and even more things to be made in the United States in terms of textiles and apparel, where the labor costs are higher to manufacture a lot of these products, so there's a lot less in some ways, and we have a lot of labor standards, a lot more than some of the other countries that are manufacturing these products.
Yeah, before you answer, Remake actually just won Documentary of the Year from the LA Fashion Film Festival, and the film that won was Made in America, and there's a perception that the label means that it's vetted more and that the actual fabrics are, and that's not always the case. You do have to be very conscious still of the brands that are producing it, and certain brands like Reformation that have grown with ethical standards, when they grow too big, then they have to rely on finding foreign partners that can support their ethical supply chain, but then you're going into oversupply, and then also the question of more emissions by getting the materials from there to here to some of them still being manufactured physically here while the fabrics are produced there. So I think the Made in America is twofold, because while there are in some cases some companies really being more conscious about the materials and the laborers and their salary, that is not empowering in all cases. And maybe you can give more insight on that.
Yeah, it's a big question, but a really important one too, so I'll just try to answer just a couple quick things here. 50 years ago, 95% of clothes that Americans wore were manufactured in the United States. Today, that number is barely 5%. So, you know, there are great positives to producing onshore, but unfortunately, we gave up that technology and infrastructure and human capital years ago. So we can't just flip a switch and only manufacture back onshore here. Some estimates it would take 10 years before we would have the training for folks and the factories and the materials, all those things. So that's not a short-term solution. But there are some production facilities here. So I think there's education for designers to know where to go to be able to produce here in the United States. And it's often a benefit for younger, newer designers who are just starting out. You know, if your factory is a couple blocks away or a couple subway stops away, it's a lot easier to check on the production and make changes as opposed to shipping something halfway around the world each time. So look, I'm a big proponent of Made in the USA, Made in New York. We have to update what Made in the USA means. Those rules also haven't been updated in a while, and some of them are a little fuzzy about what exactly, how much percentage can actually be overseas and still haven't considered to be Made in America. We need to update our tariff schedule, because right now we have higher tariffs on importing certain types of materials. It was a protectionist measure for back when we used to produce it here in the US, but we don't anymore. And then also, you know, again, big proponent of manufacturing onshore, but there's a real role for factories overseas as well, for women's rights, economic rights in developing countries. Obviously, these factories have to be safe and provide a living wage, but if there weren't the factories there, a lot of these women would have no access to employment, and that's so important for the development of themselves and their children and the country as a whole. So it's a big balancing act and a big question, but thank you for asking it.
Hi, my name is Lauren, and I'm a junior here at GW, and my question is, how can we as consumers become more aware of the potential for greenwashing from big companies like H&M and Zara? Because when I hear that they now care about sustainability, I'm very skeptical. And also, what role can the government play in maybe enforcing more transparency with considering those companies?
So this might be very controversial for me to say this, but the brand that I was at was Victoria's Secret, and I saw the very unsexy things behind the scenes. And then our leading competitor, I was specifically focused on the collegiate brand, which was Pink, was Aerie. And Aerie's mission is real bodies, real empowerment, but the factories and the quality of the clothing isn't different. And if you're going to say you're a brand that focuses on women empowerment, and 80% of your garments are created by women in their mid-20s overseas that are subject to assault, subject to low wages, that are stuck and have to do that to support their family, then you're not really an empowering brand. So I think we have to be aware of marketers and what they're doing, and I think you made a really great point about greenwashing specific, is a lot of people are pointing fingers and asking questions to these large retailers and they're being forced to react. You see brands like Ralph Lauren where they're making polos made out of water bottles, but it actually takes more water to create those polos, and it's only a sliver of their collection, and the majority of their actual things that are in stores are still not up to standards and par. So I think as a consumer, it's a big undertaking to know where to go, and that's why when I saw behind the curtain and I knew I needed to change personally, I decided to look for resources and was having trouble seeing with like corporate interests and companies having affiliations, and that's where I actually truly found Remake. And what's interesting about Remake is because we're a nonprofit, we don't get any gain from working with brands, and we actually have a vetting process, kind of like if you imagine the Sephora Green collection, if it was actually real and Sephora had no interest behind it. But Remake, what we do is we have a team that goes in and checks not just the sustainability standards of these organizations and these companies, but also making sure that they're like the ethical standards of the employer and the factory and the women's wages all are within our standards. And so I think for me, when I'm looking to shop more ethically and be more conscious, you can ask the brand specifically, and if they don't have answers for you, that's kind of a red flag if it's not listed on their website. But then also finding places like the Good On You app or Remake that have lists that have already done all the work.
So coming from my end, I'm also not super controversial, but teach learn. I'm skeptical as well, just because it's kind of ironic in some cases that at the moment sustainable or green fashion is almost trendy, which is, you know, a term that is aligned to fast fashion. So I always think about when thinking of shopping at H&M or places like that, do they have plans that are transparent online that talk about their long-term goals for being sustainable brands and their mission or any statements that they have? Are there clear areas where it says that they have a plan to not just do this one campaign, but do something that's actually, that would be a multiple year, decade-long initiative. And so that being said, and going over what you were saying, it's important always to think before, you know, the brands that you're actually consuming, they may have a campaign that looks sexy, but is it truly something that they will continue to have year after year and continue to make changes in their production processes? And segueing that from, you know, thinking before you consume, but think before, I'm going to do another like loose plug here too, think before you donate, so not just, I'm going to donate something, but who are you going to donate to? Who are those donations going to help? Are they going to be for a for-profit organization or company who had a donation bin at the gas station, it was there, oh, I'm going to reuse and recycle, I'm going to donate, put it there, but there's no branding or you don't know who that's going to? Or is it going to a nonprofit who is helping like Just for Success, empower and help women in the workforce? Or at Goodwill with their job training programs and helping people get diplomas. So thinking before you consume at certain brands, even if they're doing something that seems to be cool, and then thinking before you donate as well.
So I think your skepticism is great fuel to make sure that these brands who are making these new claims really do walk the walk, as like the term we heard earlier. And yes, your voice counts. So if you're like me, you're very stingy with your money and where you spend it, and that's how I shop as well. I just lost my thought for a second.
Well, she thinks that you're right. These morning panels on a Saturday you're right. It's very hard to tell what the standard is, in part because there is no one definition of what is sustainable. So everyone can sort of fit it in their own way. The government's tried to address this by having something called the Green Guides that were started in 1992, and they've been updated periodically since then. And it's certain goals, so companies can't make false claims. It's only as good as the enforcement, right? So it's the Federal Trade Commission, the FTC really needs to be enforcing these claims, and to try to think about what is sustainable and we're talking about made in America. Is it only sustainable if it's onshore, or you're not sustaining the jobs for women overseas? So I mean, everything's a trade-off. Everything sort of has some balance. But without a solid definition, it is really hard to figure out what people are saying.
So if you don't listen or subscribe to Wardrobe Crisis, you should. And the woman that did that, she just started a new Instagram called Greenwash Wash, which is kind of like Diet Prada. So she only has a few posts, but she's starting, but that's another place you can kind of go check on these people.
We have time for one more question. She like jumped out there.
It's actually not a question, it's just something I think is really important for this group to know, people that are interested in sustainability. I'm Hilary from owner and co-founder of Lady Farmer, and speaking from the agricultural standpoint, your clothes are an agricultural product, and I think there's a very common perception that cotton is a natural fiber. I hear people saying all the time, oh, I only wear natural things, cotton, 100% cotton. I look for 100% cotton when I buy clothes. But the reality is that from an agricultural standpoint, cotton is like one of the plant's really conventionally grown cotton is one of the plant's dirtiest products. In fact, it uses 30 to 35% of the world agricultural use of herbicides and pesticides. And that statistic that you spoke about, a t-shirt, like what a person drinks the water a person drinks in 3 years' time goes to making one cotton t-shirt that is conventionally grown cotton. So be aware of this, and also we don't know yet, since a lot of these pesticides that are being used on the crops are new. Like glyphosate only started really being used extensively on this crops in the mid-90s. So there's not a lot of research and data that I have found, if anybody else has, let me know, that shows what the residue is in these fabrics. So we try to tell people through our blogs and education and so forth, but please, choose organic cotton when you have the opportunity. The organic cotton industry is only between 1% to 3% of the entire cotton industry right now. So it's very, very small, it's a tiny sliver. But the more consumer pressure that the conventional cotton industry gets, that we don't want this, we don't want to wear glyphosate on our skin, we don't want to put glyphosate on our babies, we don't want to sleep in it. So just know this, everybody, that 100% conventionally grown cotton is not a natural fiber.
All right, one question. I'm going to come up to her after, right? Serious? Yeah.
Hello, my name is Bibiana. Thank you all for speaking. So, in terms of transparency, and then also how we're not let's say we are exporting a lot of things. They're not great news, but it's all of our second leftover that's going down south. And so I've been trying to figure out who in the U.S., and I know it's NGOs and like factory relief services and like churches and donation centers, but maybe you could speak to this a little bit, why there's no regulation to track who is dumping all of this, and there's no accountability for it. So, yeah.
I don't have an answer for that. My guess would be that there is a lack of education about that, right? I think people don't realize this is happening, and people just think, well, I've donated it, this is great, I'm doing better than throwing it away. That there are major considerations for what you donate. So I mean, that's part of the education campaign we talk about for consumers, but also then for your elected representatives, to think about how we could try to oversee that. I mean, it is part of a trade deal. I don't know, but I think it's a lack of education about it right now.
Just knowing you can, people will. It's the back end of the story you have to focus on is having that less.
I was going to say, talking from on behalf of Goodwill, I know we do have suppliers that are, in national and internationally, but going back to what you were just saying, it goes back to why are there so many items that are going overseas? Why are we consuming so much? Consume less first before we have to think about how we're going to recycle it or use it in another way.
And just to end on that question, and I think is a great one, is outside of it's actually consumer packaged good and having reusable product that's not single-time use. But when you think about an item, you have to think of its entire journey from start to finish. And I think what's really incredible about that question is we don't know, right? Right now, a lot of these countries don't want our plastics, our garments, because they have too much. And so we're at a point where I think the industry is shifting because there's no answer as to where the product goes next. And I think as consumers become more aware of this and as the industry continues to shift, hopefully we won't continue to see this problem. But I think it's a really big one and it's an unanswered one for sure. And then we're good.